Hi again then guys, and welcome to of course another car review from the 1.43 selection of vehicles to drop in the game, and now we are turning our attention to Subaru with the Impreza WRX STi Type R Coupe. Does it need a longer name? Definitely not. Now, a number of people have said, is this actually worth buying instead of the 22B? Of course it is pretty similar, but at the same time, not to somebody who knows the differences. It's kind of like the Porsche 911. It is different, but it's kind of not at the same time, if you know what I mean. Or pretty much every car that Morgan has ever made, in other words. Now, as far as what this car can do, I'm not going to come in with some rash statement like, oh, it's better than the 22B, or it's better even in any particular way, because the Impreza 22B is already a very good all-rounder. It's reasonably priced for what it is. It's already a fantastic collector's piece, the handling is very good, it's got a ton of grip, it's surprisingly forgiving, of course it's great off-road because of the rally heritage. This one offers pretty much all the same things, so it's one of those occasions where you could make, I would say, a valid argument actually for the car not necessarily needing to be in the game. But that argument doesn't really go over to the point of being a duplicate. And there is a big difference, because you could definitely bring a car to the game which is just a needless duplicate, like the Clio. Pretty much everyone is unanimously on board with that now, I think. As far as this one, though, it's not a duplicate. It is a very different car, but at the same time, the performance is very similar. So that is certainly something that you could argue. Now, with that being the case, should you buy this one? Well, chances are most people probably have already, because it's a new car, you want to check it out, it's not particularly expensive to buy it anyway. It's what, 30,000 credits, so doesn't exactly put a dent in the bank by GT Sport standards. And so the question, of course, is, should you buy it, first of all? And as a secondary and arguably more important question, if you do choose to buy it, what's it good for? Well, I'm not going to say that it can do anything that the 22B can't, because it kind of can't. They're very similar. They're both very good in the same ways, they both have the same advantages, and if there were any significant disadvantages, they'd pretty much both have them anyway, because they are that similar. 276 horsepower from a 2-litre turbo boxer engine, 260 pound-feet of torque. It only weighs 1,260 kilos as well, which is very good. And as I've said before, that's easily one of the best things about the 90s era of JDM, because these days you cannot really make a car like this that lightweight, because the safety tech, fuel-saving tech, environmental tech, soundproofing, all this kind of stuff, plus the fact that cars these days are just bigger anyway, you can't really make cars that light anymore. And of course, I am specifically talking about stuff like this, a 4-seater, practical, all-wheel drive, decent-sized vehicle. Of course, you can make something like an Ariel Atom lighter than that, but that's not the point. Now, in terms of tuned potential, well, you can see from this video, even in the rain, of course, it's all-wheel drive, so rain isn't going to be that much of an issue, it can easily keep up with cars that have way more power. Now, if I recall correctly, I think I'm running this one around N500, so it is, of course, tuned, and I'm running up against cars which I think was something like N7 or N800, so the potential is clearly there, and of course all-wheel drive is going to give you more often than not an advantage when you're up against supercars and exotics, because not that many of them tend to be all-wheel drive. Most of them are rear-wheel drive, mid-engine, front-engine, whatever the case may be. So again, that's the exact kind of advantage that you'd expect an Impreza to give you. So I would say that in terms of its performance, it's not going to surprise you. The straight line performance is good, the acceleration is definitely better than the top speed in terms of which one is stronger, the handling is easily one of the best points about it. I mentioned in my overarching thoughts about the 1.43 patch that the handling is a little bit heavier over the front end than you might like, but you can definitely adjust that, and for whatever reasons it is one of the very few cars in the game that you can actually adjust the center split on the diff with, so you can have, I think it's like 35% over the front end in terms of the bias, or of course up to 50-50 in terms of the split. I would never recommend going that high because you don't need that much going to the front end, but it is nice of course to have the option if you want it, and off-road in particular it could potentially be worthwhile to have a more 50-50 style split, maybe a 40-60, something like that. But for on-road racing I would definitely recommend having more of a rear bias when it comes to the center split. In terms of tuning the car, well, the great thing about an Impreza or an Evo, even something like a Mitsubishi GTO that we reviewed before, and even some which aren't all-wheel drive, something like an Integra or a Civic EK for instance, there are just certain cars which they're already so well made and so well set up that they're good already out of the box. You don't really need to do this extensive overhaul to make it a good car. It already is. Whereas some cars, and I'm sure you can think of some for your own experience, you kind of need to fettle them for it to be good. Generally speaking, a rear-wheel drive sports car, for instance, they'll be very tail-happy. Maybe an older car, like a muscle car, will be very wallowy and heavy. So you need to make these adjustments. With JDM, I would say easily one of the strongest points about them is that they tend to already be set up, to some degree at least, for competition. So they're already very good. So in terms of my overarching thoughts on this Impreza, do I feel that it was a good car to add? Would I have preferred something else? Well, to answer that first one first, was it a good car to add? Yes, it's a good car in a general sense. It's not going to wow you, it certainly won't blow your mind, and if you've driven the 22B before, it won't really bring anything that you haven't already done with that car. And as I said, I do still prefer the 22B. It's the homologation special of Subarus, and there aren't that many of those, so of course it's the better car from a collector's point of view, but would I have chosen this one? Well, that one's a much easier answer. I would say no. I would not have chosen to add this Impreza to the game, and of course this is a highly theoretical and subjective part of the discussion, because who really cares? It's in there now, so it makes no difference. But my argument for that would have been making it so similar to the 22B in terms of their choice, I think was a mistake, because even if it was the four-door sedan, that would have been at least something different, and there are so few high-performance sedans in the game, it would have been a legitimate one to add, so that's kind of a shame, because we've got, what, a couple of Evos, the Hellcat and the Mazda Atenza, and apart from that, not very many, and not many of those are really, really good, which is why the Hellcat stands out so much. On the other hand, my personal choice, if they were going to add an Impreza, would have actually been to add the wagon. I would have loved to have seen the wagon, because it would have been the first estate car in the game, and that would have been even more significant than the sedan version. So that would have been my personal choice, even if you went for like the same model year even. It just would have been something completely new, and it would have given the car so much more value from the game's lineup point of view, and it would have also quelled a lot of these discussions as to whether or not it's a necessary car, and also some people who are discussing or speculating on it being essentially a duplicate. I don't agree with that. Of course it's not a duplicate, but I can understand why people who aren't familiar with the 22B could think that. They're both coupes, they're both Subaru Imprezas, they're both from the late 90s, and they do look fairly similar to those who aren't familiar with them. So by having something like the sedan or the wagon, they could have completely skipped all that and had something much more exciting, as far as I'm concerned. But overall, this is what they went for, so that's what we've got to work with. Overall though, if you are an Impreza fan, it's not going to let you down. If you prefer a more street-honed, everyday Impreza kind of approach, rather than, of course, the full-on homologation special that is the 22B, then it might be the car for you. Otherwise, if you are already a fan of the 22B and don't feel that it's really lacking in any way, this one isn't going to deliver for you. And the only single advantage I might give to this car over that one is that it does not have a wide arch body kit like the 22B has. That is sometimes an advantage, because having a narrower car, especially on some tracks, for instance if Monaco was in the game, or Dragon Trail with those very tight corners toward the end of the track, a thinner car makes a big difference. It makes it more manoeuvrable, easier to overtake, easier to, as I said, manoeuvre the car in general, so that is something to bear in mind, but even then, it's not that much narrower. It's not like the 22B is huge anyway. So overall, that's it for my thoughts. Of course, I'd love to hear yours down below, and yes, of course I will be doing tuning for this car as well, but for now, as always, thanks for watching.